Hello, Night Seekers, and welcome to Lacuna Noir. This is where forgotten stories and gentle voices meet, carrying you softly into peaceful sleep, wrapped in mystery. Before tonight's stories begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know. And a little note before we begin. You may notice a few brief ads in the first 10 minutes, but after that, the rest of the video is completely ad-free. Just you, the silence, and the stories. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the night carry you. If you're drawn to these quiet, shadowed nights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a story when darkness calls. My biggest insecurity growing up was where I came from. My family wasn't poor in the sense that we went hungry or didn't have a roof over our heads. My parents worked hard, we paid the bills, and I had a decent childhood. But we were working class, and for some reason, once I reached my teenage years, I became embarrassed by that. I hated the way some of my relatives spoke. I hated telling people what my father did for work. I hated admitting that most of our family holidays had been cheap road trips rather than trips overseas. By the time I got accepted into a prestigious college on a scholarship, I had convinced myself that getting away from my hometown also meant getting away from the person I'd been there. I changed the way I spoke. Not completely, but enough that people who knew me before college noticed. I stopped using certain words. I tried to flatten my old accent. I bought designer clothes from outlet stores and secondhand websites because I couldn't afford them new. I learned about restaurants I'd never eaten at, places I'd never visited, and hobbies I'd never actually tried. I memorized enough information to sound like I belonged in conversations about sailing, investing, expensive watches, skiing, and wine. It was ridiculous. I can admit that now. Back then, I thought I was improving myself. That was around the time I started dating Victoria. Victoria actually did come from money. Her family had the kind of life I'd spent years pretending I understood. Private schools, European holidays, a large house, parents who casually talked about people with names I'd only ever seen in newspapers. The strange thing was that Victoria didn't care much about any of it. She wore old sweaters until the sleeves started coming apart. She preferred cheap takeout to expensive restaurants. She complained whenever her parents dragged her to formal events. I think that was partly why we worked. I admired the world she came from. She admired that I had worked hard to get where I was. Unfortunately, instead of simply enjoying our relationship, I constantly felt like I had something to prove. I wanted her to see me as someone who belonged beside her. Maybe more than that, I wanted her family to see it. My most embarrassing habit was learning useless facts before spending time with them. I would read financial news before dinner with her father so I could casually mention the markets. I once spent an entire afternoon learning about polo because her uncle played. Victoria knew exactly what I was doing. She teased me for it, but never cruelly. Usually she'd smile, squeeze my hand, and tell me I didn't need to impress anyone. I never listened. The wine trip was probably the biggest example. I had turned 21 the previous year and had recently decided that understanding wine was another thing sophisticated people were supposed to do. The problem was that I knew almost nothing about it. I liked wine. That was about the extent of my expertise. Still, I decided that a weekend wine tasting would be impressive. I searched online for vineyards in Napa Valley and spent an embarrassing amount of time comparing prices. I didn't want somewhere too cheap because I thought Victoria would notice. I also couldn't afford somewhere genuinely expensive. Eventually, I found a place called Scarlet Landing. The website looked professional. Beautiful vineyard photographs. A large estate. private tasting rooms, weekend accommodation. The reviews I saw were limited, but generally positive. That should have bothered me, considering how long the place claimed to have been operating, but at the time, I didn't think about it. I booked us a weekend. Victoria was excited, although mostly because she liked the idea of getting away from campus for a couple of days. We drove up on a Friday. The journey into Napa was beautiful. Rolling hills, long rows of grapevines, patches of trees, and sunlight stretching across everything. The farther we drove from the main roads, the more isolated it became. Scarlet Landing was farther out than I'd expected. The final road wound through vineyards before reaching a large property hidden behind trees. The estate itself was impressive. There was an old lodge with pale stone walls, several smaller buildings, and acres of grapevines running down the hills behind it. When we parked, a woman came outside almost immediately. Her name was Pauline. She looked to be somewhere in her 40s and was dressed in a long coat and boots. Everything about her was polished. Her hair, her posture, the way she spoke. Exactly the sort of person who instantly made me feel like the working-class kid pretending to belong. She welcomed us warmly and led us into the main building. There were 6 other guests attending the tasting, all older than us. 2 married couples and 2 men who seemed to know each other. Everyone was friendly. We sat in a lounge with cheese, crackers, fruit, and cured meats while waiting for the tasting to begin. This was where I started performing. That's the only word for it. Performing, I started talking about wines I'd supposedly tried, restaurants I'd supposedly visited, trips I'd supposedly taken. Most of it was either heavily exaggerated or complete nonsense. Victoria sat beside me with a glass of water, occasionally giving me a look that said she knew exactly what I was doing. At one point, she leaned close and whispered, "You know you can just be yourself, right?" I smiled and ignored her. Eventually, Pauline returned and led us to the tasting room. A man named Francois was serving the wine. He started with whites, a Riesling, a Pinot Grigio, then a Chardonnay. I noticed something strange almost immediately. The wines were unusually sweet, not just fruity. There was a salty taste underneath. It wasn't overpowering, but it was noticeable. Victoria noticed too. She took another sip and frowned. "That's strange." I asked what she meant. Salty, I had tasted it. But because I wanted to look knowledgeable, I immediately started talking about acidity and mineral notes as if I had any idea what I was saying. The others seemed to enjoy the wine. Nobody complained. Victoria tried another glass and made a face. "I don't like these." Pauline smiled politely. "Perhaps the reds will be more to your taste." The red wines came next. Pinot Noir, Malbec, Shiraz. The first sip stopped me for a second. There was a metallic taste. Not strong, but definitely there. It reminded me of the taste you get when you bite your lip. Victoria seemed even more uncomfortable. She took one sip of the second red and set the glass down. "Something's wrong with this." I felt embarrassed. I wish I could explain how stupid that sounds to me now. My girlfriend was telling me something tasted wrong, and instead of trusting her, I worried that she was making us look unsophisticated. I quietly told her it was probably supposed to taste that way. She stared at me. "You don't actually believe that." Before I could answer, she tried another small sip. Then she gagged. Not dramatically. She covered her mouth and pushed the glass away. "I think I'm going back to the room. I should have gone with her. That is the single decision I have replayed more than any other. I should have stood up, thanked everyone, and followed Victoria. Instead, I stayed. Partly because I'd paid for the tasting. Mostly because I was enjoying the attention. Victoria left alone. I finished the remaining wine and spent another hour talking with the other guests. By then, I was definitely drunk. I'd made another mistake during the tasting. I hadn't realized that you weren't expected to finish every glass. Most of the other guests had been pouring excess wine into a basin provided on the counter. I had emptied almost everything I was given. Eventually, Pauline came over to me. She told me the owner of Scarlet Landing wanted to meet me. His name was Bertrand. I remember feeling absurdly proud. I genuinely thought I'd impressed somebody. Pauline said he sometimes enjoyed meeting younger guests and that he'd invited me to have dinner in his private study. I accepted immediately. She led me through another section of the lodge into a beautiful room filled with old books, dark wood furniture, paintings, and antique cabinets. Then she left me alone. I waited almost an hour. When Bertrand finally arrived, he looked exactly like I imagined the wealthy owner of a Napa vineyard would look. He was probably in his 60s. Gray hair, expensive clothes, calm voice. He apologized for keeping me waiting and offered me Merlot. Merlot happened to be my favorite. Or at least, it was before that night. We sat at a small dining table. Food was brought in. Bertrand poured the wine himself. I tasted it. The same metallic flavor was there. Stronger this time. It was also warmer than I'd expected. I noticed both things, and still I drank it. I was too focused on impressing him. I talked about college, my plans after graduation, business, wine, things I knew almost nothing about. Bertrand listened patiently. Eventually he smiled and told me something that completely caught me off guard. He said he knew I wasn't for money. My stomach dropped. I thought I'd embarrassed myself. Then he said that was precisely why he'd wanted to meet me. He told me he'd also come from a working-class family. He said he admired people who wanted more from life, people with ambition, people willing to change themselves to get into rooms where they hadn't been born welcome. It felt like he understood me. That was dangerous. He knew exactly what I wanted to hear. At some point, he started talking about the future of the vineyard. He said he was getting older. He needed younger people around him, people with ambition. He even suggested that I might be someone he could mentor. I'd met the man less than 2 hours earlier. Any sensible person would have found this strange. I found it flattering. By then, I'd had another glass of wine. I asked jokingly whether Victoria would get a position too. Bertrand's smile changed. We have different uses for people like Victoria. I remember the sentence exactly. The alcohol couldn't soften it. Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. I asked what he meant. He waved his hand. Nothing you need concern yourself with tonight. That was the first moment I truly wanted to leave. I stood up and told him I should probably go check on Victoria. He didn't try to stop me. He simply smiled and told me to sleep well. The estate looked completely different at night. During the day, it had seemed peaceful. At night, it felt enormous and empty. Only a few exterior lamps were on. I'd had far too much to drink, and I couldn't remember exactly which building contained our room. I walked through a corridor, opened one door, realized I was in the wrong place, and continued. Eventually, I saw a light beneath another door. I thought I'd found the accommodation wing. I opened it. At first, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. The room was dimly lit. Several people stood around a large table. I recognized them. They were the other guests from the wine tasting. They weren't wearing the same clothes anymore. Most were dressed in dark robes or black clothing. Then I saw Victoria. She was lying on the table. For one stupid second, I thought she was receiving medical treatment. There were tubes, metal equipment, containers. Then I saw the blood. There was so much of it that my brain struggled to process the scene. Victoria's skin was almost gray. Her eyes were partly open, but she wasn't moving. Thin tubes ran from her arms. There were cuts near her legs. Blood was being collected into containers beside the table. I said her name. Someone turned. Then another person looked at me. Victoria didn't. My stomach turned violently. I vomited onto the floor. I heard footsteps behind me. Bertrand, he didn't sound surprised. In fact, he almost sounded annoyed that I'd found the room earlier than intended. What did you do to her? My voice barely came out. Bertrand looked past me toward Victoria. Then he said something about their wines having a special ingredient. At first, I genuinely thought I had misunderstood. Then he explained. Not every bottle. Not enough for customers to immediately recognize it, but certain batches, certain private tastings. Human blood was mixed into some of the reds, plasma into some of the whites, small amounts. Enough, according to him, to change the flavor. I looked at the glass still in my hand. I dropped it. Then I understood something worse. The Merlot Bertrand had been serving me during dinner. He had poured it after Victoria left the tasting. I looked at him. He smiled. I knew. I don't know if it was actually Victoria's blood in that bottle. Maybe he only wanted me to believe it was. But at that moment, I believed him completely. I rushed toward the table. Two men stepped between me and Victoria. One grabbed my shoulder. I swung at him. I don't remember connecting. I only remember stumbling backward. Bertrand told them to wait. Then he looked at me. You have a decision to make. He said I could leave that room as part of what they were doing, or I could stay there with Victoria. I looked at her again. There was no movement in her chest. Nothing. I called her name. No response. I'd abandoned her to stay downstairs and impress strangers. That realization nearly broke me. Bertrand stepped closer. I backed away. My hand went into my pocket. Earlier that weekend, I'd packed a tiny bottle of wine drops. I occasionally got headaches from wine, and someone had recommended them to me. You added a few drops to a glass to reduce certain compounds. I'd been too embarrassed to use them during the tasting. That stupid insecurity probably saved my life. I pulled the bottle out. When Bertrand reached for me, I squeezed the contents directly into his face. He screamed and covered his eyes. I ran. Someone grabbed the back of my shirt. I twisted hard enough that the fabric tore. Then I was through the doorway. I heard people behind me. I ran through the corridor. I slammed into a table, knocked over something made of glass. Kept going. Behind me, someone shouted for the doors to be locked. I reached the main lobby. The front door was still open. My car was outside. The keys were in my pocket. I don't remember getting across the parking area. 1 second, I was running. The next, I was inside my car, trying to start it with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The engine turned over. Headlights appeared behind me. Someone was running toward the car. I reversed so fast, I nearly hit another vehicle. Then I drove. I didn't care about the landscaping. I went across grass, hit part of a low wooden fence, and found the access road. Someone followed me for several miles. I could see headlights behind me. Then they disappeared. I kept driving. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station that was still open. I called 911. I probably sounded insane. I told them my girlfriend had been attacked at a vineyard. I told them people were collecting her blood. I told them she might already be dead. Officers arrived. I repeated everything. Then came the questions. How much had I been drinking? A lot. Had I taken drugs? No. Was I sure of what I'd seen? Yes. Could I give them the address? I tried. That was when another problem became obvious. I'd booked everything online, and I couldn't remember the exact road. I pulled up the confirmation email. The booking link wouldn't open. Scarlet Landing's website was gone. Not temporarily unavailable, Gone, the officers still took me seriously enough to search. I went with them part of the way and tried to guide them from memory. We found the road, then the turn. The estate was there. But when police entered the property, most of the people were gone. Victoria was gone, too. The room I'd seen had been cleaned. There was medical equipment, but no blood, no body, no obvious evidence of murder. I kept telling them what I'd seen. They searched. They questioned the few employees still there. Bertrand wasn't among them. Neither was Pauline. The people remaining claimed they had no idea who I was talking about. Police eventually opened a missing person investigation for Victoria. They questioned me repeatedly. For a while, I was terrified they thought I'd hurt her myself. Maybe some of them did. My blood alcohol level that night certainly didn't help me. But security footage from a gas station showed Victoria entering the vineyard with me earlier that day. My phone location also showed me leaving alone hours later. She was never seen again. When investigators returned to Scarlet Landing several days later, the property was effectively abandoned. The company connected to it had been dissolved. The website never returned. Most of the employees couldn't be located. The owner listed in county records wasn't Bertrand. It was a corporation registered through several other companies. Police did investigate. I want to make that clear. At the time, in my anger and grief, I convinced myself nobody cared. That wasn't completely fair. Detectives questioned me for months. They searched financial records. They tried tracking down the people I described. But without Victoria's body and without physical evidence from that room, there was only so much they could prove. Scarlet Landing disappeared. Victoria did too. That was several years ago. Her disappearance changed me. All the things I'd thought mattered suddenly seemed pathetic. The clothes, the accent, pretending I'd visited places I hadn't, trying to impress people who didn't care whether I existed. Victoria had never asked me to become any of those things. She liked me before I'd convinced myself I needed to become someone else. I wish I'd understood that while she was alive. I don't drink wine anymore. For a while, I didn't drink anything. Eventually, I started having an occasional beer with my father when I visited home, the same cheap brand he drank when I was growing up. There was a time when I would have been embarrassed to order it in front of certain people. Now, I couldn't care less. There is one reason I'm telling this story. About 3 weeks ago, I was at a restaurant for a friend's birthday. Nothing expensive, just a normal place. Someone ordered a bottle of red wine for the table. I declined. Eventually, the bottle reached a man sitting beside me. He took a sip, then stopped. He laughed and said, "That's strange." I asked what he meant. He took another sip. Kind of metallic. My entire body went cold. I asked to see the bottle. The label wasn't Scarlet Landing. Different name, different design. According to the back, it came from a small private vineyard in Northern California. I searched the company when I got home. The website was beautiful. Luxury tastings, private weekend accommodation, invitation-only dinners. The photographs showed a completely different estate. I almost convinced myself it was coincidence. Then I opened the page introducing their staff. There were only 3 photographs. One was the sommelier. One was a woman who handled bookings. The third was the vineyard's founder. His hair was almost completely white now. He was wearing glasses. The name underneath the photograph wasn't Bertrand. But it was him. I know it was. Same face, same eyes, same smile. I stared at that photograph for nearly an hour. Then I called the detective who handled Victoria's case. I sent him everything. The website, the photograph, the bottle information. He told me not to contact the vineyard myself. I won't. I learned that lesson once. But before I closed the website, I noticed a page for customer reviews. Most were ordinary. Beautiful property, wonderful staff, excellent wines. Then I found one posted 2 days earlier. A woman had written, "My husband loved the reds, but I found them strangely metallic. Maybe they're just an acquired taste. I don't know who she is. I don't know if she is still there. But I know exactly what happened the last time someone I loved said that." A couple of weeks ago, I bought an old car from a dealership just off the interstate in rural Montana. Buying an old American car had been something I wanted to do for years. Ever since I was a teenager, I had this picture in my head of owning something from the 50s or 60s. A Cadillac, maybe. A Mustang, if I ever found one I could afford. Something big, heavy, and completely different from the modern cars everyone drives now. I never seriously expected it to happen. Vintage cars in decent condition usually cost more money than I can justify spending, especially on something that would basically be a second car. I already had a Toyota that got me to work every day without giving me problems. Buying another vehicle was a luxury, not something I needed. Then I saw the Ford. It was a 1954 Ford Crestline sitting near the edge of a small used car lot. The dealership itself wasn't much to look at. It was one of those places you can easily drive past without noticing. A faded sign, a tiny office, gravel covering most of the lot, and maybe 15 or 20 vehicles sitting outside. Most of them were ordinary used trucks and SUVs. But the Ford stood out immediately. It looked almost too good to be sitting there. The body was clean. The chrome still had a shine to it. The interior looked surprisingly well preserved through the windows. Even the white-walled tires looked decent. I pulled over without really thinking about it. There was an older guy inside the office. I don't remember exactly how old he was, maybe late 50s or early 60s. He had that weathered look a lot of people around here have after spending most of their lives outdoors. He came outside when he saw me looking at the Ford. I asked him how much he wanted for it. He looked at the car, then back at me. $2,000. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. For the Ford? Yep, $2,000. He nodded. I asked him what was wrong with it. He said nothing major. According to him, he just couldn't sell it. Everybody around here wants trucks and Jeeps, he said. Nobody wants an old thing like that anymore. That wasn't completely unbelievable. In rural Montana, you see pickups, SUVs, Jeeps, and anything else that can handle rough roads and bad weather. An old sedan isn't exactly the most practical choice. Still, $2,000 seemed ridiculous. I asked him again if there was a catch. He smiled and said, "Take her off my hands and you'd be doing me a favor." I should probably mention that I did inspect the car before buying it. I'm not completely stupid. The paperwork looked right. The VIN matched. Nothing obvious came up that made me think the car had been stolen or that there was some legal problem attached to it. Mechanically, it wasn't perfect, but it was far better than I expected. There were a few minor things I knew I'd eventually need to work on, but the engine started easily and sounded healthy. So, I bought it. Driving that car home was honestly one of the happiest moments I'd had in months. I know that sounds dramatic, but anyone who has finally bought something they've wanted since they were young will understand. For the next couple of weeks, I drove it mostly at night. I still used my Toyota for work because I didn't trust a 70-year-old car enough to depend on it every morning. But after dinner, especially if the weather was nice, I'd take the Ford out and cruise around town. There was something relaxing about it. The roads here get quiet at night. You can drive for long stretches without seeing anyone. I'd roll the window down, listen to the engine, and pretend for half an hour that I'd somehow gone back in time. The first strange thing happened during one of those drives. I had been driving around for maybe 40 minutes when I looked at the old radio. It was still the original unit, or at least it looked original. I'd never actually tried it. Normally, I just use Spotify in my Toyota, so having a working radio in the Ford wasn't important to me. Still, I wanted to know whether it worked. I turned it on. Static, that was actually encouraging. At least the thing had power. I started adjusting the tuner slowly. For a while, there was nothing except white noise. Then I heard a voice. It was weak at first. I adjusted the dial carefully until the signal became slightly clearer. A man was talking. The sound quality was terrible, with bursts of static cutting through almost every sentence, but there was something about the man's voice that immediately sounded strange. He had that exaggerated announcer style you hear in old recordings. Then I caught part of what he was saying. He was talking about doctors and Camel cigarettes. There was a laugh track after the line. I remember actually taking my foot off the accelerator for a second. I listened more carefully. It sounded exactly like an old radio program from the 1950s. Not a modern station playing old material, not somebody discussing old broadcasts. It sounded like I had tuned directly into one. The voices had that compressed, distant, quality old recordings have. There was a little musical jingle. Then, more laughter. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the whole thing vanished. Static filled the car again. I tried moving the dial back and forth. Nothing. I even stopped the car on the side of the road and spent another 5 minutes searching. I couldn't find the station again. I told myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe some local station was playing archival material. Maybe somebody nearby was broadcasting something strange. I checked around the interior when I got home because I wondered whether the previous owner had installed some hidden cassette player or modern audio system somewhere. There was nothing. By that point, the whole thing had started bothering me more than it probably should have. It wasn't terrifying, just wrong. The air inside the car had felt colder after the broadcast ended, although I knew that could have been my imagination. I parked the Ford and went inside. The next morning, I went to work like normal. I work at a music store, and one of my coworkers, Thomas, knew how excited I'd been about buying the car. Almost as soon as I walked in, he asked how the 54 was treating me. I told him what happened. At first, he laughed. Then he realized I was serious. "You sure it was actually from the 50s?" he asked. I told him about the announcer, the cigarette advertisement, the laugh track, and the sound quality. Thomas suggested it might have been a modern station broadcasting some old show. I told him that was possible, but the signal had been strange. It faded in slowly, stayed for less than a minute, and then disappeared completely. Thomas started talking about old radio signals. He's the kind of guy who knows random facts about almost everything and loves explaining them. He told me that under unusual conditions, radio signals can travel much farther than expected. He started talking about the atmosphere, signals reflecting, old transmissions, and even signals escaping into space. Then he suggested, mostly joking, that maybe some old broadcast had somehow bounced back. I asked if he was telling me aliens had returned a radio show from 1954. He called me an idiot. We laughed about it. That conversation actually helped. By the end of my shift, the whole thing felt less disturbing. Maybe I just experienced some extremely unusual radio interference. Rare doesn't mean impossible. For the next several nights, I kept driving the Ford. Nothing happened. A few times, I deliberately turned the radio on and searched for the strange station. Only static. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it. Then, 3 nights ago, the radio turned itself on. I was driving slowly through a residential area. It was warm outside, and I had the window open. The streets were nearly empty. I was just enjoying the night and thinking about work when the dashboard suddenly lit up. The radio. I hadn't touched it. The same warm golden light appeared behind the dial. Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice came through. Hello? I jerked the steering wheel hard enough that I nearly clipped a fire hydrant. I hit the brakes and pulled over. The voice continued through heavy static. Gentlemen. Then, another burst of interference. My name is... I leaned closer. Gabrielle, a laugh track suddenly played. The same laughter I'd heard the first night. Except this time, it didn't sound funny. It sounded wrong. Too loud. Too close. I reached for the radio and tried switching it off. Nothing happened. I turned the knob again. Still nothing. The laughter continued. Then the woman spoke again. Help. Static. Me. Another burst. Steve. I froze. Stephen? My name is Stephen. I shut the car off immediately. The engine died. The dashboard lights went dark. So did the radio. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel. Nobody else was on the street. No cars, no people walking, not even anyone standing at a nearby window. I stayed there for several minutes before starting the car again. The radio didn't come back on. I drove straight home. That night, I barely slept. The first broadcast was strange. This was different. A random old signal could not know my name. The next day, I went down every possible explanation I could think of. Maybe someone was messing with me. Thomas knew about the first broadcasts. Maybe he'd somehow found a way to transmit something directly to the car. I researched small FM transmitters and localized radio signals. It turns out there are ways to broadcast over short distances, but whoever was doing it would need equipment, and more importantly, they would need to be close. I had been alone on an almost empty street in the middle of the night. When I saw Thomas at work, I told him I'd heard it again. He laughed at first. Then, I told him it had said my name. That shut him up. He asked whether I had recorded it. I hadn't. Then he suggested, half seriously, that maybe I'd been smoking too much. That annoyed me enough that I told him to come with me the next night. If it happens again, you'll hear it yourself. Thomas agreed. We went out around midnight. I deliberately turned the radio on and left it playing static. We drove for hours. Nothing happened. By 2 in the morning, Thomas had fallen asleep in the passenger seat. I was getting tired, too. I started thinking maybe the whole thing really had been some strange coincidence. Then the static changed. A voice came through. Good evening. I sat straight up. Thomas, he didn't move. Thomas, wake up. I shook his shoulder. He opened his eyes, confused. What? It's happening. Then the radio said, Gentlemen. Thomas stared at the dashboard. The voice was clearer this time, still broken apart by static, but definitely understandable. You have to. Static, help me. Thomas whispered, What the hell is that? I told him to be quiet. I had brought a small notepad with me because I wanted to write down anything I heard. The radio crackled again. Avenge, then me. Neither of us said anything. More static. Set me, a long burst of white noise. Free, I started writing every word down. Thomas was fully awake now. Then another word came through. I couldn't understand the first part. It sounded like row, or maybe just part of another word. Then, clearly, Briggs. Thomas looked at me. Briggs? I wrote it down. There is an older man in our town named Briggs. Everybody knows him. He's lived here for decades. He's an Air Force veteran and one of those older guys who seems to know everybody. You see him drinking coffee around town, playing golf when the weather is good. talking to people at local events. I've never heard anyone say anything bad about him. Before I could say anything, the radio crackled again. Then the voice came through clearly enough that neither of us could misunderstand it. He killed me. Thomas and I looked at each other. That was when the static exploded. There is no better way to describe it. The volume suddenly became unbearable. I reached for the radio, but before I could touch it, pain shot through my ears. Thomas screamed. The sound wasn't just loud. It felt like it was inside my skull. My vision blurred. I remember seeing Thomas cover his ears. I remember trying to turn the engine off. Then everything disappeared. When I opened my eyes, sunlight was coming through the windshield. For a few seconds, I had no idea where I was. Thomas was asleep beside me. My head was pounding. I woke him up. He looked just as confused as I felt. The strange part was that neither of us could immediately remember what had happened. Thomas asked if we'd fallen asleep waiting for the signal. For a few seconds, I thought maybe we had. Then I saw blood dried near his ear. I touched mine. There was blood there, too. I looked around the car. My notepad was lying on the floor. I picked it up, and everything came back. Good evening. Help M.E. Avenge M.E. Set M.E. free. Briggs, he killed M.E. Thomas read the page. He didn't joke after that. For the first time since this started, I had someone else who had heard it. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It made everything worse. Because now I knew I wasn't imagining it. We spent most of that day talking about Briggs. Neither of us wanted to believe the message. Briggs had lived in town for as long as either of us could remember. He was an Air Force veteran, yes, but that didn't make him a murderer. The idea felt ridiculous. Thomas suggested there might be some evidence if the voice was telling the truth. So after work, we went to the local library. We searched old newspapers and whatever local records we could find. We didn't even know what we were looking for. A disappearance. A murder. Someone named Gabrielle. Anything connected to Briggs. After a while, the whole thing started feeling insane again. There we were, two grown men searching decades-old newspapers because a radio in a 1954 Ford had accused an old man of murder. I finally told Thomas I was done. I didn't care what the radio was. A ghost. A prank. Some impossible signal. Whatever, I wanted nothing more to do with it. I told him I was taking the Ford back to the dealership. I wanted my old boring life back. Thomas didn't argue. The next morning, I drove out toward the interstate. I knew exactly where the dealership was. I remembered the turn. I remembered the faded sign. I remembered the little office. I remembered standing there while the dealer counted the money I gave him. I reached the intersection. The dealership wasn't there. I thought I'd passed it. I turned around. Nothing, I drove farther down the road, then back again. Nothing, the place where the dealership should have been, was an empty field. No building, no gravel lot, no sign, no cars, nothing, just grass. I pulled over. I actually checked the map on my phone because I thought I had somehow gotten confused, but I hadn't. That was the place. I got out of the Ford and stood beside the road, staring at that empty field. There wasn't even evidence that a business had recently been there. No tire marks. No concrete foundation. Nothing. That was when my phone rang. Thomas, I answered. Before I could say anything, he told me to come back to the library. His voice sounded strange, not excited. Scared, I asked what he'd found. He just said, "You need to see this." I drove back into town. When I got to the library, Thomas was sitting in front of one of the computers. His elbows were on the desk. Both hands were buried in his hair. He didn't say anything when I walked over. He just pointed at the screen. It was an old newspaper article. July 1989. The headline said that a young woman had been found dead in the woods, and police suspected foul play. I started reading. The body had been discovered outside town. Police believed the woman had been killed elsewhere and left there. Her first name was Charlotte. That confused me at first because the voice on the radio had sounded like it said Gabrielle. Then Thomas pointed lower down the page. There was a section about people police wanted to question. One name stood out. Briggs, the article didn't say he had been arrested. It didn't say he had been charged, just that investigators wanted to speak with him because he had apparently been seen with the victim shortly before she disappeared. I kept reading. Then I saw something that made my stomach turn. Charlotte had owned a car, a 1954 Ford Crestline, same color as mine. The vehicle disappeared around the same time she did. Police never found it. I looked through the library window toward the parking lot. The Ford was sitting outside. Thomas whispered, "Steve." I didn't answer. He pointed at another part of the article. There was a photograph. It was grainy and black and white, but clear enough. Charlotte was standing beside a car. My car. Same chrome, same trim, same small dent near the rear quarter panel that I'd been planning to repair. I felt sick. But that still wasn't the worst part. There was a man standing beside her, older than Charlotte, smiling toward the camera. Thomas enlarged the photo. I recognized him immediately. It was the man from the dealership, the man who sold me the Ford. Except the article identified him as Charlotte's father. And according to a second article Thomas found, he died in 1993. I told Thomas that couldn't be right. I had spoken to him. I'd handed him money. He gave me the keys. Thomas asked whether I had a receipt. I did. It was still in the glove box. We went outside together. Neither of us wanted to touch the car. Eventually, I opened the passenger door and pulled out the paperwork. The receipt was exactly where I'd left it. $2,000. The date from a couple of weeks ago. The dealership name printed across the top. Thomas searched the name on his phone. Nothing. No business listing. No website. No registration. Nothing. Then he looked at the dealer's signature. His face went pale. He took the newspaper photograph we'd saved on his phone and zoomed in on the caption. Charlotte's father's surname was the same name written on my receipt. I haven't driven the Ford since. It's sitting outside my house right now. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. I considered calling the police, but what exactly would I tell them? That I bought a missing car from a man who's been dead for more than 30 years? That its radio is accusing one of the most respected old men in town of murder? That two people heard a dead woman asking to be avenged? I don't even know whether the woman on the radio is Charlotte. She said Gabrielle. Or at least that's what I thought I heard. Maybe I heard it wrong through the static. Maybe Gabrielle was someone else. Maybe there were more victims. I don't know. Thomas thinks we should keep searching. I think we should leave it alone. Briggs is still alive. That might be the part that scares me most. If the voice is telling the truth, then I've spent my entire life seeing a murderer around town without knowing it. And if the voice isn't telling the truth, then something in that car wants me to believe he is. I don't know which possibility is worse. Last night, I stayed home. I left the Ford, parked outside. I took the keys into my bedroom and put them on the dresser. Around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up. At first, I didn't know why. Then I heard something faint outside. Static. I walked to the bedroom window. The Ford was sitting exactly where I'd left it. Dark, empty. Then the radio inside turned on. I could see the golden light glowing through the windshield. My bedroom window was closed, but somehow I could still hear it. Static, then a woman's voice. Very faint. "Stephen." I didn't move. "Stephen," I backed away from the window. Then she said something I hadn't heard before. "He's coming." A few seconds later, the radio went silent. I didn't sleep after that. This morning, I looked outside. There were tire tracks in the dirt leading away from my driveway, then coming back. The Ford was parked in exactly the same place. The keys were still on my dresser, and about an hour ago, Thomas called me. "Briggs is dead. They found him early this morning. He was sitting in his kitchen. No sign of forced entry. No obvious injuries. But Thomas heard one detail from someone he knows who lives nearby. Apparently, Briggs had called the police sometime during the night. He told them there was an old Ford parked outside his house. When officers arrived, there was nothing there. I haven't told them about my car. I haven't told anyone except Thomas. Right now, I'm sitting in my living room watching the Ford through the window. The radio has been turning on every few minutes. I can't hear what it's saying from inside the house. But about 10 minutes ago, I finally worked up the nerve to go outside. I stopped about halfway down the driveway. The radio was playing another old broadcast. A man's voice this time. The same cheerful 1950s announcer I heard on the first night. He was laughing. Then the signal cleared for just a few seconds, and I heard him say, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have another passenger." Then the rear door of the Ford opened by itself. Sorry to pause for just a moment. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope you're enjoying the calm so far. If you'd like more nights like this, true stories, gentle rain, no interruptions, please subscribe to Lacuna Noir. It really helps me keep creating these peaceful experiences for you. And tap the bell so you're here every time a new story arrives in the dark. Now, back to the story. It started a few weeks ago with a missing person poster at the train station. I was heading home after class when I noticed it taped to one of the poles near the platform. It was just a normal sheet of white printer paper held in place by two dirty pieces of tape, one across the top and another near the bottom. The wind kept lifting one side of it and folding the paper over itself. Even from where I was standing, though, I could see the large red word printed across the top. Missing, I had a few minutes before my train arrived, so I looked at it without getting any closer. Most of the information was difficult to read from that distance. I could make out that it was a young woman, probably around my age, and there was a photograph in the middle of the page. Then the wind caught the poster again. For a second, the photograph became visible. I saw curly black hair framing a smiling face. That was about it. My train pulled into the station before I could read anything else. I stepped aboard, put my headphones back in properly, and forgot about the poster before we'd even reached the next stop. At least, I thought I had. A couple of days later, I saw the same poster on a telephone pole. Then another one outside a convenience store. Another was taped beside a bus stop. Soon I started seeing them everywhere. Stop signs, storefront windows, utility poles, the sides of buildings, community notice boards. Then I started seeing posts online, too. People were sharing the same photograph across local Facebook groups and Instagram pages. It felt like the whole city was slowly filling with her face. The more often I saw the posters, the more familiar she became. Her name was Mackenzie Davis. The photograph seemed to have been cropped from a group picture. You could still see part of another girl's arm around her, but everyone else had been cut out. Mackenzie was smiling widely in the photo, like someone had taken it while she was laughing. She had long, thick black curls that fell over her shoulders. There were several tattoos visible, a detailed floral design around her stomach and hip, a snake tattoo that started somewhere around her right forearm and continued upward beneath her sleeve. She had an eyebrow piercing and another piercing below her lower lip. Her makeup was fairly heavy, with large black eyeliner wings and dark lipstick. She looked confident, the sort of person who probably stood out when she walked into a room. According to the poster, Mackenzie had disappeared after finishing a shift at a local bar. She had been expected home that night, but never showed up. Her roommates tried calling. Nothing. Her phone eventually stopped showing a location. Her car was missing too. Nobody seemed to know where she'd gone. The poster listed her as 21 years old, about 5'6", with black hair and brown eyes. At first, I felt bad for her in the same distant way most people do when they see a missing person poster. You hope the person is found. You wonder what happened. Then you continue with your day. But I couldn't stop seeing her. Everywhere I went, there was Mackenzie. I'd leave campus and find one of her posters taped near the entrance. I'd go to buy food and see her photograph in the store window. I'd open social media, and someone would have shared another post, asking for information. I even started recognizing which posters were older based on how damaged they were. Some were clean and newly printed, others were faded from sunlight. A few had been torn by rain. There were times when I'd walk past one without intentionally looking at it and still know exactly where her face was on the page. It started getting under my skin. It felt like she was following me. Not physically, just her photograph. That same smiling face appearing everywhere I went. I remember standing at another station one afternoon and noticing 3 separate posters from where I was waiting. One on a pillar, one beside the stairs, one taped to the wall across the tracks. 3 Mackenzies staring back at me. I started wondering whether there had always been that many posters, and I had simply never noticed them. Later that night, I searched online for why that happens. I found something called the frequency illusion. Basically, once something catches your attention, you begin noticing it everywhere. Maybe you learn a new word, and suddenly it seems like everyone is using it. Or someone tells you about a particular model of car, and suddenly you notice that car every time you drive somewhere. Nothing has actually changed. Your brain has just started paying attention. That explanation made sense. I'd seen Mackenzie's poster once. Now my brain was trained to recognize her. That was why it felt like she was everywhere. I actually felt better after reading about it. For a few days, I stopped thinking there was anything strange about how often I saw her. Then, 3 days ago, I saw Mackenzie herself. At least I think I did. I was sitting in one of my classes. It's a biology course I've had trouble with before, and unfortunately, it's also one of the classes I need to pass. The classroom is on an upper floor, and I usually sit near the window. From there, you get a clear view across the main university courtyard. When I lose focus during lectures, which happens more than I'd like to admit, I usually watch people moving between buildings. Students rushing to class, people sitting on benches, someone dragging a bicycle up the stairs. Normal campus stuff. That day, our professor was going through something in a slow voice that made it nearly impossible for me to stay focused. I started watching the courtyard again. Across from our building is another tall academic building with large windows. Most of the blinds were shut. Some rooms were dark. But there was one room on the 3rd floor where the blinds were open. I happened to be looking toward it when somebody moved past the window. It lasted maybe 1 second, probably less. A woman crossed part of the room and immediately disappeared behind a wall. I didn't see her face. I barely saw her body. Mostly hair. Black, curly, long. I immediately thought of Mackenzie. Then I told myself I was being stupid. There are thousands of women with curly black hair, especially on a university campus. I almost looked away. Then the woman moved past the window again. This time, I saw her arm. There was something dark running along her forearm. A tattoo. I leaned closer to the glass without even realizing what I was doing. For another second, the woman remained visible. Then she disappeared again. I couldn't make out every detail from that distance, but I swear the tattoo looked like scales, a long pattern winding up her arm and disappearing beneath the sleeve of a white shirt. The snake. Mackenzie had a snake tattoo running up her right arm. I sat completely still. I kept waiting for the woman to cross the window again. She didn't. 5 minutes passed. Then, 10. I stopped hearing the lecture completely. Every time someone moved in one of the surrounding windows, I looked up. Nothing. Eventually, I realized people around me were closing laptops and putting notebooks into their bags. Class was over. I had spent almost the entire lecture staring at that window. As I started packing my things, the professor walked over. She looked concerned. "Are you doing okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." You were staring outside almost the entire class. "I've got some things on my mind." She gave me that look professors sometimes give when they don't quite believe you. Then she reminded me that this wasn't exactly a class I could afford to ignore. She knew I'd struggled with it before. I was already embarrassed and didn't want to explain that I thought I'd just seen a missing woman through the window of another building. So I apologized, picked up my backpack, and left. I considered going across the courtyard to the building. I actually stood outside for a minute thinking about it. Then I imagined myself walking around the 3rd floor asking strangers if they'd seen a woman from a missing person poster. What would I even say? I didn't see her face. Maybe I didn't even see the tattoo correctly. So I went home. The entire train ride, I replayed those few seconds in my head. Black curls, white shirt, dark tattoo curling along the arm. It wasn't enough. I knew that. If I called the police and reported it, they'd ask whether I could positively identify her. I couldn't. I told myself stress was getting to me. I'd been seeing Mackenzie's face everywhere for weeks. Of course my brain would connect some random woman with her. I tried to forget about it. Then I saw her. Again today. I was at the grocery store near my apartment. My roommate had texted asking me to grab milk on my way home, so I stopped there after class. I had the milk in my hand and was walking into another aisle when someone came around the opposite end. Again, it happened quickly. A woman. White top. Black hair. She turned the corner before I saw her face, but this time she was much closer. Close enough that I saw the tattoos. There were flowers along the exposed skin near her waist. Black jeans. White shirt. Long, curly hair. My entire body went cold. I stepped backward, then hurried toward the next aisle, hoping to intercept her. Instead, I walked directly into an elderly woman's shopping cart. The carton of milk slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. It burst. Milk spread across the tiles. The woman shouted something at me. I apologized, but I barely heard her. I kept looking toward the end of the aisle. The woman with the black hair was gone. An employee eventually came over. I explained what happened. They brought a mop and warning sign. It probably took 10 minutes to clean everything. The second they told me I could go, I started searching the store. I walked every aisle. Produce, frozen food, bakery, cleaning supplies. Checkout, nothing. There wasn't even another woman with hair that looked similar. I went outside and checked the parking lot. Nobody. I stood there feeling like an idiot. Maybe she'd already left. Maybe she'd gone into a restroom. Maybe I'd seen someone who just happened to look similar. But this sighting felt different from the one on campus. I had been close. I saw the floral tattoo. The poster shows flowers across Mackenzie's stomach and hip. The woman in the grocery store had a floral design in the same place. I went home and searched Mackenzie's name. There wasn't much information beyond what I'd already seen. Her social media accounts had barely been active even before she disappeared. There were some old photographs, a couple tagged posts, nothing that connected her to me, no mutual friends, no shared classes that I could find. Nothing. That's what makes this so strange. I've never known Mackenzie. At least I don't think I have. The weirdest part is that I've been to the bar where she worked. Quite a few times, actually. It's not far from campus, and my friends like going there. I checked old pictures from nights we'd spent there. I looked in the backgrounds. I even went through videos. No Mackenzie. Maybe she worked different shifts. Maybe I simply never noticed her. But her face doesn't feel familiar from before the posters started appearing. Now I could probably draw it from memory. I've spent hours looking at the missing person posts. I know the curve of her eyebrows. I know which side her hair falls toward in the photograph. I know where the snake tattoo disappears under her shirt. That scares me because I can no longer trust what I'm seeing. If I see another woman with black curls, maybe my brain fills in the tattoos. If I see a tattoo, maybe I convince myself it's the same one. But if that's all this is, why have I now seen her twice? Why did both women disappear before I could see their faces? I asked one of my friends what he thought. He told me the obvious thing. Call the police. Report the sightings. Let them decide whether it matters. I haven't done it. I know that probably sounds irresponsible. But what exactly am I supposed to report? I saw part of a woman through a third-floor window. Then I saw the back of another woman in a grocery store. Neither time did I see her face. I can't honestly say it was Mackenzie. And I already have a less than friendly history with the local police. Nothing major, but enough that I don't exactly enjoy speaking with them. The last thing I want is to call with something this vague and have them decide I'm wasting their time. So I tried to ignore it. Tonight I went back through the missing person posts again. That's when I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before. Mackenzie disappeared almost 6 weeks ago. The first poster I noticed at the train station appeared around 3 weeks after she vanished. That means people had already been searching for her for quite a while before I ever knew she existed. I started scrolling through older posts. Her roommates had been sharing pictures from almost the first day. Friends had organized searches. There were posts asking people to check security cameras. One of them mentioned the last confirmed place Mackenzie had been seen. The bar. I clicked through more posts. Someone had uploaded a photograph taken outside the bar on the night she disappeared. The timestamp was shortly after midnight. Mackenzie was visible in the background. She was leaving through the side entrance. The picture wasn't very clear, but it was definitely her. I zoomed in. White top, black pants, curly hair. Then I noticed someone farther behind her, a man leaving through the same door. I stared at him for a while because there was something familiar about the way he stood. The picture was blurry. His face was almost completely turned away. I told myself I'd never seen him before. Then I saw the backpack. My backpack. Same brand. Same dark color. Same small white patch near the bottom where the material tore last year. I actually went to my room and pulled my backpack from beside my desk. I compared it with the photograph. It looked identical. I started feeling sick. I checked the date again. I opened my phone calendar. I checked messages from that night. My friends and I had been at that bar. I had completely forgotten. I found the group chat. Ryan had texted asking if everyone was coming out. Another friend sent a picture from inside. Then there was a message from me at 12:41 a.m. heading home. Got class tomorrow. I stared at it. Mackenzie disappeared after her shift that same night. I still don't remember seeing her. I don't remember leaving through the side door. Normally, I use the main entrance. But in the photograph, that man behind Mackenzie looks like he could be me. Could be. That's the important part. You can't see his face. I sent the picture to my roommate and asked if he thought the guy looked like me. He said, maybe. Then he asked why. I didn't answer. Instead, I searched my phone for photos from that night. Nothing after around 11. I checked location history. Most of it was normal. Campus, apartment, bar. Then, for some reason, location tracking stopped just after midnight. It came back almost 3 hours later. At home. I don't remember those 3 hours. I know how that sounds. I've been drunk before. I've forgotten parts of nights before. But according to the messages I sent, I wasn't that drunk. And I went to class the next morning. I don't remember waking up sick or confused. I called my friend who had been with me that night. I tried to sound casual. I asked if he remembered me leaving. He said yes. I asked if I left alone. There was a pause. Then he said, I think so. I asked what that meant. He said he'd been drinking and couldn't remember clearly. Then he asked why I was asking. I told him it was nothing. After we hung up, he texted me. Actually, there was some girl talking to you near closing. Forgot about that. I asked what she looked like. He said he didn't know. Dark hair. That was all. I haven't replied. I've been sitting here for almost 2 hours trying to decide whether I should call the police. I know I probably should. Maybe the sightings mean Mackenzie is alive. Maybe she's hiding. Maybe she recognizes me from that night and has been trying to get my attention. But why wouldn't she just talk to me? Why would she disappear every time I got close? And why can't I remember meeting her? About 20 minutes ago, I checked the missing person page again. There was a new post. Police found Mackenzie's car yesterday. It had been abandoned outside the city. They didn't give the exact location. No information about whether they found anything inside. The comments were mostly people sending prayers and asking for updates. Then I noticed one comment near the bottom. No profile picture. The account looked new. The comment had been posted less than a minute earlier. It said, he remembers more than he thinks. I refreshed the page. The comment was gone. Maybe someone deleted it. Maybe I imagined it. I don't know anymore. Then, while I was typing this, my roommate came into my room. He asked whether I'd ordered food. I said no. He told me there was someone standing outside our building. A woman. He saw her through the living room window. I asked what she looked like. He shrugged. Black curly hair. White shirt. I ran into the living room. By the time I reached the window, nobody was there. I went outside anyway. The sidewalk was empty. It's raining now, so the pavement is wet. There were footprints leading from the street to the entrance of our building. Bare feet. They stopped directly beneath our living room window. There were no footprints leading away. I came back upstairs and locked the door. My roommate thinks I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. A few minutes ago, I opened my backpack because I wanted to find a charger. There was something inside the front pocket, a folded piece of paper. I know it wasn't there earlier. It's one of Mackenzie's missing person posters. Same photograph, same red missing across the top. But someone has drawn a thick black line through the word missing. Underneath it, written in pen, are 3 words. You found M.E. I haven't told my roommate yet. And I still haven't called the police. because there's something else on the back. An address. I recognize the street. It's less than 20 minutes from campus. And underneath the address, someone wrote, "You already know the way." I grew up in a pretty normal middle-class household, and like a lot of people, I was raised with certain rules about wasting electricity. If you left a room, you turned the fan off. If you were going outside, you didn't leave the radio playing. And you definitely didn't leave the television running while nobody was watching it, unless you wanted one of your parents to remind you that they were not made of money. Those little habits stayed with me. I'm 30 now. I have my own house, no kids, no spouse, and a decent job that pays enough for me to live comfortably. Technically, I can do whatever I want in my own place. Sometimes I take advantage of that. I'll eat ice cream for breakfast if I feel like it. I'll spend an entire weekend in pajamas. I'll turn the music up louder than I ever could when I lived in an apartment, because there's nobody above me banging on the floor. Living alone has its benefits, but I still can't stand wasting electricity. Call me cheap if you want. I don't care. Leaving electronics running all day when nobody is using them just bothers me. I probably take it further than most people. My television has a sleep timer, and I use it almost every night. Most of the electronics in my house are set up the same way. If I forget to shut something off, it'll eventually turn itself off. That had never caused me any problems. Until last night. It started like any other normal evening. I was stretched out on the couch downstairs, texting some friends while reruns of regular show played on the television. I wasn't really paying attention to the show. It was mostly background noise. My friend Ryan was making everyone laugh in our group chat, and Amy was sending photos from her vacation in Cancun. We were giving her a hard time about constantly reminding us that she was sitting on a beach while the rest of us were stuck working. Nothing strange was happening, nothing even remotely unusual. At some point, I got up and went to the bathroom. I couldn't have been gone more than a few minutes. When I came back into the living room, the television was off. The room was suddenly much quieter, without the cartoon playing. I didn't think anything of it. I assumed I had lost track of time and the sleep timer had kicked in. That happened, occasionally. I checked the time on my phone, but I didn't bother turning the television back on because I wasn't really watching it anyway. Looking back, I really wish I had. I went back to the couch and continued talking to my friends for another 10 or 15 minutes. Eventually, my eyes started getting heavy. I told everyone good night, put my phone on the coffee table beside me, and leaned farther back into the couch. I decided I might as well sleep there. Another small advantage of living alone is that nobody cares if you sleep in your bedroom, on the couch, or on the kitchen floor for that matter. The house was dark except for a small lamp beside the couch. It gave off just enough warm light for me to see around the living room without keeping me awake. Now, I don't mean to brag, but my television is nice. It's one of those huge 70-inch 4K TVs. Probably one of the most expensive things I bought after moving into the house. Whenever friends come over to watch football or a movie, everyone ends up commenting on it. When it's on, the picture is unbelievably sharp. When it's off, though, the screen turns into this massive piece of dark reflective glass. As I lay there getting sleepy, my eyes naturally drifted toward it. The black screen reflected most of the living room. Not clearly like a mirror. Everything looked darker and slightly distorted. I could make out the lamp beside me, the bookcase against the wall, the opening leading into the dining room behind the couch, the coffee table, and my own dark shape stretched across the cushions. I wasn't really thinking about any of it. My eyes were unfocused. I was somewhere between being awake and asleep when I noticed movement. At first, I assumed it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. Then, I focused on the screen. My reflection was lying on the couch. Its head was turned toward the television exactly the way mine was. For a second, everything looked completely normal. Then, the reflection sat up. I didn't. Every trace of sleep disappeared from my body. I stared at the screen. My dark reflection stood up from the couch. Then, it walked away. It moved toward the dining room and disappeared from the reflection. I sat completely still. I think I stopped breathing for a few seconds. Then I turned around so quickly that I hurt my neck. Nobody was behind me. The dining room was empty. I looked toward the hallway. Nothing. My first thought was that somebody had gotten inside the house. I actually stood up and looked around, but then this stupid thought entered my head. Maybe I had been more tired than I realized. Maybe I had briefly fallen asleep. Maybe I had somehow confused my own movement with what I saw reflected on the television. It didn't make much sense, but it was better than believing my reflection had just stood up and walked away without me. I sat back down. I stared at the television again. The reflection of the room was still there. Lamp, bookcase, dining room, coffee table, couch, but I couldn't see myself. I moved one arm. Nothing moved on the screen. I leaned slightly forward. Still nothing. I remember thinking that maybe the angle was wrong. Maybe the darkness was hiding my reflection. Then, something appeared near the edge of the television screen. A person. My shape. It walked slowly back into view. I was still lying on the couch. The reflection walked toward the couch anyway. That was when I jumped up. There was no way I had imagined that. Someone had to be inside my house. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep in a closet near the stairs. It's an old aluminum one from when I used to play years ago. I hadn't touched it in forever, but suddenly it felt like the most important object I owned. I switched on every light downstairs. Then I searched. I checked the kitchen, dining room, laundry room, bathroom, every closet. I checked behind curtains, even though there was nowhere for a grown person to hide there. I checked the front and back doors. Both were locked. The windows were closed. Nothing looked broken. Then I went upstairs. I checked my bedroom, the guest room, bathroom, closets, even underneath the beds. Nothing. At one point, I actually called out. "I know you're in here." My voice sounded ridiculous in the empty house. Nobody answered. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding that baseball bat. Listening, the house was completely silent. Eventually, I started feeling embarrassed. There was nobody there. Maybe exhaustion really was getting to me. I had been working too much lately. I'd also stayed up way too late several nights playing Call of Duty with friends and drinking more than I probably should. Maybe my brain had finally decided to punish me. I carried the bat downstairs anyway. When I returned to the living room, everything looked normal. The television was still off. I stood there for a few seconds before looking at the screen. There was the room. And there I was. My silhouette was sitting on the couch, exactly where it should have been. I actually laughed. Quietly. Mostly from relief. "Idiot," I said to myself. I put the baseball bat beside the couch and sat back down. I told myself I had been half asleep and had scared myself over nothing. I leaned back. My reflection leaned back too, or at least I thought it did. I closed my eyes for a moment. Then something bothered me. I opened them again. My reflection was sitting upright. I wasn't. I slowly lifted my head. The silhouette on the screen stayed sitting. Then it raised one hand and waved at me. I didn't move. It waved again. I spun around. Nobody. I looked back at the television. The silhouette was still there, sitting on my couch in the reflection, watching me. I lunged for the remote. My hands were shaking badly enough that I almost dropped it. I hit the power button. The television came on immediately. The bright colors of the cartoon filled the screen. Characters started shouting. Music played. The dark figure vanished. I sat there staring at the show, breathing hard. For some reason, the normal noise made me feel safer. I opened the television settings and went straight to the sleep timer. I shut it off completely. No timer, no automatic shutdown, nothing. I checked twice. Then I backed out of the menu. I remember actually feeling relieved. Whatever strange thing I thought I had seen couldn't happen if the screen stayed on. Then I heard it. Click. The television shut off. The room fell dark again. I stared at the remote. My thumb wasn't touching the power button. I tried turning the television back on. Nothing happened. I pressed the button again. Nothing again. Still nothing. I started telling myself the remote batteries were dying. There had to be an explanation. I didn't want to look directly at the screen. I kept my eyes mostly closed and pressed the button repeatedly. Nothing happened. Eventually, I realized I would have to use the physical power button on the television. That meant getting close to the screen. I stood up. I crossed the space between the couch and the television slowly. I must have looked completely insane. I kept one hand over my eyes while feeling along the lower edge of the television with the other. Finding the button was harder than it should have been. My fingers kept sliding along the frame. For several seconds, all I could hear was my breathing. Then I found it. I pressed the button. The television came alive. Bright light flooded the living room. Sound returned. I dropped my hand from my face and actually smiled. For about 2 seconds, I felt victorious. Then, click, the television turned off again. I was standing less than 2 feet from it. The black screen reflected me perfectly, except my reflection wasn't standing. It was sitting on the floor, right against the inside of the screen. I froze. The reflection's face was only inches from mine. I could make out the shape of my head, my hair, my shoulders, the basic outline of my face. But there were no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a black human-shaped version of me pressed against the glass. I stepped backward. It didn't. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then it lifted one hand. It waved. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe I still needed to convince myself it was some kind of reflection. Maybe my brain was desperately trying to find one last logical explanation. I slowly turned my head to the left. The figure turned its head left, exactly with me. I stopped. It stopped. I turned my head to the right. It followed. Same speed, same angle. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it. I raised one hand. It raised the same hand. I moved my fingers. It copied me. For a few seconds, I felt a tiny bit of relief. Maybe this was some bizarre effect from the screen. Maybe the room lighting was creating some kind of distorted reflection. I lowered my head. The figure didn't. I stopped. My eyes stayed fixed on the television. My chin was pointed toward my chest, but the silhouette remained facing forward. Its blank face was still pointed directly at me. I slowly raised my head again. It hadn't moved. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was watching me. There is a huge difference between seeing something and feeling watched by it. I could feel it. Even without eyes, I knew that thing was looking directly at me. Neither of us moved. Then it raised its hand. It waved again. But this wave was different. Slower, one side to the other. Not hello. Goodbye, I ran. I didn't grab my shoes. I didn't grab the baseball bat. I almost forgot my phone, but thankfully I had shoved it into my pocket earlier. I unlocked the front door and sprinted outside. I didn't even stop to lock it behind me. I ran down the driveway barefoot and kept going until I was several houses away. Only then did I realize I was standing outside in pajama pants and a t-shirt with no shoes on. I called Ryan. He could barely understand me. I told him somebody might be inside my house. I didn't explain the television part. Not immediately. He told me to come over. Ryan only lives around 15 minutes away, but I wasn't willing to go back inside for my car keys. Thankfully, I'd left a spare key hidden outside months ago. I got into my car and drove straight to his place. I kept looking into the rearview mirror the entire drive. Nothing followed me. Ryan met me outside. The second he saw my face, he stopped making jokes. He asked what happened. I told him someone had been inside the house. Then I tried explaining the television. He gave me exactly the look you'd expect. Not laughing, just confused. He asked if I had been drinking. I hadn't. He asked if I had taken anything. I hadn't. He asked how much sleep I'd gotten lately. That question annoyed me because I already knew what he was thinking. Eventually, he offered to come back to the house with me. I said no, absolutely not. I didn't care how stupid I sounded. I wasn't going back there tonight. Ryan has a guest room. Thankfully, there's no television in it. That's where I am now. I pulled the curtains closed, even though they have nothing to do with this. I turned every light on. Ryan gave me an old pair of socks because apparently barefoot panic running isn't great for your feet. He's downstairs. I told him I was going to try to sleep. There is no chance of that happening. I'm typing this on my phone because I need somebody to tell me there is a reasonable explanation. Some weird display problem, an optical illusion, sleep deprivation, anything. But there are a few things bothering me now that I've had time to think. The first is that the television didn't just turn itself off once. It kept doing it after I disabled the sleep timer. The second is that the silhouette didn't behave randomly. It seemed to understand when I was looking at it. It waited until I noticed it. Then it waved. And the last thing is what happened around 10 minutes ago. I put my phone down on the bed. The screen eventually went dark. I tried not to look at it. I really did. But after a few seconds, I noticed my reflection in the black phone screen. Tiny and distorted, but visible. I could see my face. Part of the pillow. The ceiling behind me. I picked the phone up. My reflection moved with me. Normal, I almost laughed. Then I lowered the phone slightly. And for maybe half a second, there were two heads reflected in the screen. Mine, and another one leaning over my shoulder. I turned around so fast, I nearly fell off the bed. Nobody was there. I immediately turned the phone back on. That was when I started writing this. The screen hasn't gone black since. I keep touching it every few seconds to make sure it stays awake. Ryan just texted me from downstairs asking if I want some water. I told him yes. He said he'll bring it up. That was about 5 minutes ago. He still hasn't come upstairs. I was about to call him when something else happened. The guest room door is directly across from the bed. There is a small framed picture hanging beside it. The glass reflects part of the room. I can see myself sitting on the bed in it. Except a few seconds ago, the reflection stood up. I'm still sitting here. The reflected version of me walked toward the bedroom door. Then it stopped. It's standing there now. Its hand is resting on the doorknob. The actual doorknob hasn't moved. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't even want to look at the picture anymore, but I'm terrified of taking my eyes off it. The reflection just turned its head toward me. It has no face. And now someone is walking up the stairs. Slowly, one step at a time. I called Ryan. I can hear his phone ringing downstairs, The footsteps are still coming closer. My phone keeps trying to dim because I haven't touched the screen. I'm tapping it every few seconds. I can't let it go black. I can't look at another reflection. The footsteps stopped outside the guest room. Someone just knocked. 3 times. I haven't answered. Then Ryan's voice came through the door. He said, "Hey, I brought your water." I almost opened it. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Ryan. He wrote, "Why are you calling me?" I'm still downstairs. I looked at the framed picture. My reflection is standing directly behind the reflected door now. Its hand is still on the knob. The person outside knocked again. Ryan's voice said my name. The reflection in the picture raised one finger to where its mouth should be. Then, it slowly waved goodbye. I noticed it at 2:14 this morning. There are 4 buttons along the bottom of the baby monitor app I use for my daughter. Live, sleep, clips, and now there is a 4th one. Previous baby. I know it was not there yesterday. I am completely sure of that because I have screenshots of the app from last week. I checked them 3 times this morning just to make sure I was not imagining things. The bottom menu only had 3 options: live, sleep, clips, no previous baby. Before anyone says it might be some strange software update, I already checked that too. The app has not been updated in 11 months. The company that made the monitor went out of business back in March. Their website is still online, but most of the support pages are dead, and the app was supposed to stop receiving new features completely. So there's no reason for a new button to suddenly appear. And there's definitely no reason for what happens when I press it. It shows my daughter's bedroom, just not the bedroom she is sleeping in now. My daughter Ellie is 14 months old. Her room used to be our spare bedroom. It is nothing special. White walls, cheap laminate flooring, 1 window facing the backyard, a small closet near the door, and her crib against the interior wall. We put some little animal pictures above the changing table and bought a soft night light for the corner. But otherwise, it still looks like the same basic room it was before she was born. We bought the baby monitor secondhand because money has been tight lately. That probably sounds important, so I should explain it now. I found it on Facebook Marketplace about 6 months ago. $40. The woman selling it looked like she was in her 60s. She lived around 20 minutes away from us in an older neighborhood full of small brick houses. She was friendly enough when I picked it up. She told me her grandson had outgrown the monitor and that it had always worked perfectly. I remember asking her whether I should factory reset it before using it. She looked at the monitor for a moment and said, "It doesn't remember anything." I did not think much about that sentence at the time. I assumed she meant the monitor did not store old recordings. Now I cannot stop hearing her voice saying it. It doesn't remember anything. For 6 months, the monitor worked normally. No strange recordings, no voices, no glitches, nothing, until tonight. Ellie woke me up a little after 2 in the morning. She was not crying. She was laughing. If you have a baby, you know there are different kinds of laughter. There is the big belly laugh when something really gets them going. There is the high squeal when you play with their feet or pretend to chase them. There is the sleepy little giggle babies sometimes make when they are half awake and probably dreaming. This was different. It sounded like social laughter, like somebody was standing beside Ellie's crib, making faces at her. I stayed still for a few seconds, listening. There it was again, a little laugh. Then another. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened the monitor app. Ellie was standing in her crib. She was holding the railing with both hands and looking toward the corner beside her closet. Nothing was there. At least nothing I could see. Every few seconds, Ellie would smile toward that corner, then lower her face against her shoulder. She does that when she is shy around someone. That was the first thing that made me uncomfortable. I turned the monitor volume all the way up. For a few seconds, all I heard was the white noise machine. Then, Ellie pointed toward the corner. "Baby." I sat up. She pointed again. "Baby," I was already moving out of bed when I noticed the new button at the bottom of the screen. "Previous, baby." I stopped. I stared at it for several seconds. I should have gone straight into Ellie's room. I know that now. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. I pressed it. I wish I had not. The screen went black for maybe 3 seconds. Then, the nursery appeared again. Except it was not Ellie's nursery anymore. The camera angle was exactly the same. The window was in the same place. The closet was in the same place. The shape of the room was identical. But the walls were yellow, not pale yellow, a faded, old-looking yellow. There was a wooden crib where Ellie's white crib stands now. The flooring looked darker, too, and the curtains were different. A baby was asleep inside the wooden crib. For the first few seconds, I actually felt relieved. I thought I had figured it out. The monitor must somehow have old footage saved from the previous owner. Creepy, yes, but explainable. Then, I noticed the timestamp in the corner. Aug 13, 2:16 a.m. Today, I looked at the time on my phone. 2:16. My mouth went dry. I switched back to live. Ellie was still standing in her crib, looking toward the corner. I pressed previous baby again. Yellow nursery. Sleeping baby. Live, Ellie. Previous baby. Yellow room. Baby, I repeated it several times because my brain kept trying to find some normal explanation. Maybe the date was wrong. Maybe the recording was old, and the app was adding the current time. Maybe the company's servers had somehow restarted. I started screen recording because I knew nobody would believe me if I tried to explain it later. That was when the baby in the yellow room opened its eyes. It did not wake up normally. Its body did not move. Its breathing did not change. Its eyes simply opened, like it had been lying there pretending to sleep. Then it looked directly at the camera. I stopped moving. The baby could not have been much older than Ellie, maybe a year. Dark hair, round cheeks, small hands resting near its chest. At first, nothing looked obviously wrong. Then it smiled. That was when I noticed the mouth. It had teeth. Not the few tiny teeth babies get at that age. It had all of them. A complete set of adult-looking teeth squeezed inside that tiny mouth. Every tooth was visible, perfectly straight. Far too many. I dropped my phone onto the bed. At the same moment, Ellie laughed through the monitor speaker. Then I heard her from down the hallway. Baby and another child answered her. "Hi." I ran. I barely remember opening my bedroom door. I remember hitting Ellie's door so hard that it slammed into the wall. She was still standing in the crib, smiling toward the corner near the closet. Nothing was there. I switched on the light. I checked the closet. Empty. I looked under the crib. Nothing behind the curtains. Nothing. I even checked behind the changing table. Ellie watched me the entire time. Then she pointed behind me. Baby, I spun around. There was nobody there. That was when Ellie started crying. But she did not seem frightened. She seemed upset with me, almost angry, like I had come into the room and scared away someone she had been playing with. I picked her up and carried her back to my bedroom. I put her beside me and locked the bedroom door. Neither of us went back to sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I started searching everything I could find about the monitor. I searched the model number, old reviews, archived support pages, Reddit posts, tech forums, anything, That was when I found something I really wish I had known before buying it. The monitor itself has no internal video storage. None. It cannot save old footage locally. Every recorded clip is supposed to upload directly to the company's servers. The company's shutdown notice said those servers had been permanently disabled almost 5 months ago, so there should not have been any recordings anywhere, especially not footage showing my daughter's room with different walls. I told myself not to press previous baby again. At 3:37, I did anyway. The yellow nursery appeared. The crib was empty. I watched for maybe 30 seconds before I noticed the closet. The door was open slightly, just a narrow black gap. Something moved behind it. I closed the app immediately. At 4:05, my phone vibrated. A notification appeared. Motion detected in previous baby. I stared at it. There was no option in the settings for previous baby notifications. I checked. There was no category called previous baby anywhere in the notification controls. I tried ignoring it. Then, another notification appeared. Motion detected in previous baby. I opened the feed. The closet door was completely open now. The baby was standing inside. I mean standing. Not pulling itself up on something. Not balancing against the wall. Standing perfectly still. Its body was wrong. The face was still a baby's face. The hands looked small, too. But everything between them had stretched. The arms hung almost to the knees. The legs were too long. Its head nearly reached the clothes rod inside the closet. It looked like someone had taken a photograph of a baby and pulled the image downward until the body became too long. The thing stared into the camera. Then it slowly raised one finger. It pressed the finger against its lips. Behind me, Ellie whispered, "Shh," I almost threw my phone. Ellie was lying beside me. Her eyes were open. She was staring directly at the screen. I locked my phone. "Where's baby?" I asked. Ellie pointed toward her bedroom. Then she said something I had never heard her say before. "Other mommy." I stared at her. "What?" She smiled. "Other mommy." Then she added, "Other Ellie." I called my husband. He is working around 2 hours away this week. I did not tell him everything. How could I? I would have sounded insane. I just told him the baby monitor was acting strangely and that Ellie was saying things that were frightening me. I asked if he could come home. He asked if Ellie was okay. I told him she was. Then Ellie leaned toward the phone. "Daddy," my husband laughed. "Hey, Bug." Ellie smiled for half a second. Then she looked toward the bedroom doorway. Her expression changed completely. The smile disappeared. "Daddy," she whispered. My husband's voice came through the phone. "I'm right here, Ellie." Ellie shook her head. Then she pointed past me, toward the hallway. "Daddy," I turned. The hallway was dark, empty. I locked the bedroom door again. At 5:11, another notification appeared. Sound detected in previous baby. I ignored it. Another notification came. Then another. Then another. Finally, I opened the feed. The stretched baby was gone. A woman was standing beside the crib. Her back was facing the camera. She was holding something in her arms. A baby. A normal-looking baby this time. She rocked it gently from side to side. I could not see her face. Then she started singing, "You Are My Sunshine." That is Ellie's favorite song. But that was not what scared me. The woman sang it wrong, exactly the way I sing it wrong. There is one line I can never remember properly, so I always replace it with my own words. "You are my sunshine, my sweet little light." I have sung it that way since Ellie was a newborn. Nobody else sings it like that. The woman in the yellow room did. I felt cold all over. Then she turned around. It was me. Not someone who looked similar to me. Not someone with the same hair. She was wearing the same gray sleep shirt I was wearing at that exact moment. Her hair looked exactly like mine. Her face was mine. But something about the eyes was wrong. They looked exhausted, terrified. She was crying. The other me walked toward the camera until her face filled almost the entire screen. Then she whispered, "If you're watching this, don't let her see Ellie." I stopped breathing. The woman on the screen suddenly looked over her shoulder. Her expression changed. Pure terror. She screamed, "You have to." The feed disappeared. A loading circle appeared. Then the screen displayed a message. Previous baby unavailable. I did not wait to see if it came back. I grabbed Ellie. I stuffed diapers, wipes, a bottle, clothes, and whatever else I could reach into a bag. I grabbed my keys and shoes. I decided I was taking Ellie to my mother's house. I unlocked the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. Ellie's bedroom door was still open from earlier. As soon as we passed it, Ellie started fighting me. Not normal tantrum fighting. She panicked. She screamed so hard she started coughing. She twisted in my arms and pointed toward her bedroom. "Baby." I kept walking. "Baby." I did not look inside. "Baby." She was crying now, reaching toward the room. I carried her downstairs. By the time I reached the front door, my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely unlock it. Then my phone vibrated. Motion detected in live. I nearly ignored it. Then I realized what that meant. I was holding Ellie. There should not have been anything moving inside her bedroom. I opened the live feed. The nursery looked empty. For maybe 2 seconds. Then something crawled out from underneath Ellie's crib. The stretched baby. Its hands appeared first, then its arms, then its shoulders, then its head. The body kept coming. It did not crawl like a person. It seemed to unfold itself. Its limbs slid across the floor and straightened piece by piece until it stood beside the crib. It looked directly into the camera. Then it turned toward Ellie's bedroom door, toward the hall, toward the stairs, toward us. I opened the front door. Another notification appeared. Previous baby. I do not know why I looked. Maybe because some part of me already understood that the other version of myself was trying to warn me. The yellow nursery was back. The other me stood directly in front of the camera. She was pounding against it with both hands. Her mouth was moving. She was screaming something. There was no sound. I turned the volume on my phone all the way up. Nothing. She pointed behind the camera. Then she pointed at me. Then she pointed toward something outside the frame. Again and again, I did not understand. Then she grabbed a piece of paper. She held it toward the camera. 3 words were written across it. "That's not Ellie." I looked down. My daughter was in my arms. She had stopped crying. Completely, her breathing was calm. Her face was calm. She looked up at me. Then she smiled. "Mommy." My whole body went cold. Ellie does not call me Mommy. She never has. She has called me Mama for months. Sometimes she says, "Ma," never Mommy. I backed into the front door. The child in my arms tilted her head. "Mommy?" I did not know what to do. I still don't. What would anyone do? Throw your baby onto the floor? Run away from her? What if you're wrong? What if terror has made you imagine things? How sure would you need to be before letting go of your own child? 90%? 99? 100? Because she looked exactly like Ellie. She smelled like Ellie. The little scar underneath her chin was there, the one she got after falling against the coffee table 2 months ago. Her pajamas were the same. Her hair was the same. When she reached toward me, she moved exactly the way Ellie does when she wants me to hold her closer. So I held her. God help me, I held her. Then something screamed upstairs. A baby. My baby. I knew that cry. Every parent knows the small differences between their child's cries. This was Ellie's terrified cry. The one she makes when she wakes from a bad dream. The one she makes when she suddenly realizes she is alone. It came from upstairs, from her bedroom. The child in my arms smiled, not with a mouth full of adult teeth, nothing obvious, just Ellie's normal little four-toothed smile. Then she leaned against me. She put her mouth beside my ear. Other Ellie. The crying upstairs continued. Then it changed. The sound became lower, almost like a whining hiss. My phone vibrated again. Previous baby has ended. Another message immediately appeared beneath it. Would you like to make your current baby the previous baby? There were two buttons. Yes, not yet. I did not press either one. I got out of the house. I have been standing outside for around 20 minutes now. The little girl who looks like Ellie is sitting in the grass near the front walkway. I could not bring myself to keep holding her. I also could not bring myself to leave her inside. So I put her down gently. She has been sitting there quietly, pulling pieces of grass from the lawn. Every few seconds, she looks toward me and smiles. I called the police. I tried explaining that I thought someone might be inside my house. They asked if I had seen an intruder. I said no. They asked if there were signs of forced entry. I said no. They asked whether my daughter was safe. I looked at the little girl sitting on my lawn. I told them I did not know. There was a long silence. They said they were sending someone. That was a few minutes ago. I probably should stop typing and wait for them. But something else happened. A notification appeared on my phone, not from the Baby Monitor app. Facebook Marketplace. Someone nearby had just listed a baby monitor for $40. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the picture. Same model, same camera, same base, same scratches. There is one long scratch beside the power button on mine from before I bought it. The monitor in the listing has the exact same scratch. The seller is the same woman I bought mine from 6 months ago. Her profile picture has not changed. The description says, works perfectly. Granddaughter outgrew it. No recording saved. There are already 3 people in the comments asking whether it is still available. I messaged one of them. I told her not to buy it. She asked why. I started typing an explanation. Then I noticed something else. The listing had been posted 2 minutes ago. I clicked the seller's profile. The woman's Facebook page now says she died in April. There are posts from her family about it, funeral photos, messages saying they miss her. I know I bought the monitor from her 6 months ago. I stood inside her house. I talked to her. She took the $40 from my hand. But according to those posts, she had already been dead for almost a month when I met her. I do not know what that means. Maybe none of this works the way I think it does. Maybe previous baby does not mean the baby who owned the monitor before you. Maybe it means something else. Maybe it means the baby who is there before the one you are holding now. While I was typing this, the crying upstairs stopped. Completely, the house is silent. The little girl on the lawn noticed it too. She stopped pulling grass. She stood up. Now she is staring at the front door. She has not looked away for almost a minute. I asked her what she was looking at. She did not answer. Then the doorknob moved, just slightly. The girl backed toward me. For the first time since we came outside, she actually looked afraid. "Mommy," she whispered. I almost corrected her. I almost said Mama, but before I could, She pointed toward the door. She's coming. My phone vibrated again. The baby monitor app opened by itself. There is no live button anymore. No sleep, no clips, only previous baby. The same question is still on the screen. Would you like to make your current baby the previous baby? But something has changed. There used to be two choices. Yes, not yet. Now, not yet is gone. There is only one button left. Yes. Look, if you're still watching, you already know what this channel is. No jump scares, no fake drama, just real stories about real people who survive things most of us can't even imagine. And that's scarier than any movie could ever be. If you want more of this raw, unfiltered truth, told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe to Lacuna Noir. We're not here to waste your time. We're here to tell the stories that actually matter. Thanks for listening. Now go get some sleep, if you can.